Next up, we have Professor Vincent Teith, a stroke neurologist and clinical researcher. He's co-head of the stroke theme with Professor Julie Bernhardt. Over to you, Vincent.
Hi, good afternoon. I will introduce the stroke theme at the Florey. So stroke, as you know, is very common. About 50,000 Australians will have a stroke each year. And our theme explores different aspects of stroke, but with a strong focus on clinical translation. We are both clinicians, and our team is mostly composed of clinicians. That's not to mean that we disregard the integration with our discovery scientists. We have collaborations with Dr. Carly Ralston and other scientists, but we focus mostly on the clinical aspect. So if you want to have an experience in the clinical realm, working with patients, with humans, or with human material like imaging or genetics, we are dealing with all aspects of that. Can I see the next slide, please? So what are our strengths? We do clinical research, and as the single center model is outdated, we usually collaborate with other groups worldwide, for instance, the International Stroke Genetics Consortium, or clinical trials that accumulate a lot of neuroimaging data. We have to work within different disciplines. So you will see a lot of people that are physiotherapists, that are neurologists, or imaging specialists that work together, statisticians, to permit better inferences from the data. We usually work within the hospital environment or within a clinical environment because we focus on humans. Also, one of our focuses is to provide value for money in when people make big investments or identify therapies. Can we show that they are worthwhile in the restricted budgets that are available for healthcare? The next slide. So there's three focuses of the stroke team. Acute treatment of stroke through innovative agents and treatment strategies. We do clinical trials, for instance, of novel anti-glycemic agents in stroke. We have also, we're looking at different markers of that could predict whether a patient will respond to a certain therapy or not using advanced brain imaging. As a second strong focus is the big gap that exists when people have had a stroke. Now we can treat a lot of patients with a stroke and produce better outcome, but still about half of the people will remain severely disabled for the rest of their life. And that produces a lot of challenges. And the next phase in neuroscience is trying to understand how that some people will recover very well after a stroke and some people will not recover very well, and what's the biology behind that, and are there clinical factors or environmental factors that can promote or hinder recovery. In animals, it's well known, for instance, that if people are if rats are bred in an enriched environment, they recover better than in a less enriched environment. And maybe that's for the same for humans. How can we create this enriched environment? So those are the type of questions that are addressed in our team. I also have a strong focus on prevention of stroke and also quality monitoring. So for instance, Dom Cadillac works on and maintains the OSCAR registry, which is the large Australian registry of more than 50,000 patients with stroke now. And we collect data from several hospitals across Australia. So, and this opens up avenues for doing, for instance, big data research. Next step. Next slide, please. So there are a few projects that I can highlight. So the AVERT DOSE is a large international multi-center clinical trial where we try to identify how often and how long patients need to have physiotherapy. And that's led by Professor Bernhardt with her team. And Karen Borsman, one of her postdocs, is doing a study on complications after stroke. For instance, falls and fractures, often reasons why people with stroke end up in a nursing home. And if we can understand that process better, maybe we can avoid those nursing home placements, and that would obviously benefit society and the patients, obviously, and their families. Also, the psychology of recovery after stroke needs to be better understood, and Julie Bernhardt has a few projects around that. I have a project looking at people with a brain hemorrhage, a particular type of stroke, and applying amyloid PET, which you may know from the Alzheimer's literature, but there are also indications that this may play a big role in young people with brain hemorrhage, and I'm investigating that. I'm also running a clinical trial of an anti-inflammatory agent in stroke, and I do genetic research, and we'll have projects around Mendelian randomization and looking at stroke recovery. So there's a whole gamut of projects. I think reach out to myself or to Julie. There are more projects. If you have a particular interest, talk to us. We also work closely with Amy Brodman, who does a lot of stroke research in cognition after stroke, which is the focus of us. So, and with Dr. Carly Rulston, if you want to do stroke basic research and animal research.